the full effect of how your faith is going to impact you, they're coming. And they're coming for you. And they're going to get you because, why? What's the phrase? For my name's sake. Okay? I have not been the biggest proponent, especially in recent times, of people, particularly in the United States, crying persecution. Because I'm fully aware of what persecution looks like elsewhere in the world. And when you compare the two just on its face, it's not a comparison. Some people might feel like that, though, and so I understand it. But at the same time, it doesn't hold water to me. But this is telling me that we haven't even begun to see what's coming. We haven't even begun. And so the slippery slope begins to happen. And so today we're talking about the restriction of religious freedom and the restriction of freedom of speech and the restriction of all these things that we need to fight back against. And I'm sitting there looking at all those discussions and I'm saying, we got to be ready for what's coming after that. Right? Do I really care if I'm silenced on Facebook? Is that tribulation? I mean, it may not be great for the sake of the country necessarily, but is that really tribulation for me because of my faith? No. When they come get me, that's when it's going to start. So the persecution of disciples will increase, and then watch what happens here. When this begins, the tribulation happens, the death begins to take place, then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And at this point, up to this point, this is the one that breaks my heart the most. Why do you think people of faith, once a tribulation would start betraying one another and hating one another? Why would that happen? Fear. So either you choose between denying God or living, and so you're put under very stressful circumstances, and sometimes you don't respond well. Or, in some cases, even by proclaiming God, it's not death initially, it's betraying one another and hating one another, right? So before you die, you got to deal with all these broken relationships that your faith, at least in some way, is causing. For my name's sake, right? No one wants to sign up for that either.
And then to tie into what she was saying in relation to Judas Iscariot.
Judas. Yep.
He was paid and then he betrayed Jesus. Maybe in the same sense, in the end times, they'll buy you off.
They'll buy you off like they bought off Judas. Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people might want to give each other up, but certainly that would be one potential way it could work for sure. Yeah. So are you a true believer if you're betraying your brothers and sisters? Are you holding on to the faith if you are? Yeah, Dale.
I think a lot of it is the fact that you feel guilty.
You feel guilty about what?
Period, and you don't want to deal with that. So you want to deal with the problem, the person causing you to feel guilty.
So people might give up on each other and give up on the faith because they feel guilty.
And it says for my sake.
Yeah.
People recognize, I think even in many of the false religions, but there's something significant about Jesus.
And when you give up on him, yeah. I mean, I just feel like he's talking about people who would normally be expected to stay true, right? There's believers out there at this time. There's people following him at this moment. Peter's an example, right, of somebody who you would have thought would have actually absolutely had it and then completely falls off the wagon, right? So this is what's happening here. Many will fall away, betray one another, and hate one another. Disciples will fall away, and because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. So we're talking about relational impacts as the times progress. And we're seeing more and more of these broken relationships, these betrayals, right? Jesus also says elsewhere that, look, if you're not willing to hate your mother and your father and your brother and your sisters and everybody else around you for my sake, you got to reconsider. Why does he say that? Because there's no other relationship that holds a candle to what Jesus is expecting from us and what he can offer to us. And yet we often allow those kinds of relationships to take precedence over our connection with Jesus. So this is a reality that is one of the things that I think people, when they're looking for signs in current times, they're looking at stuff like this. And I would again argue, it ain't new. This is not new. This kind of stuff has been happening for a long time. And as someone who's been in the church for a little bit of time now, I've seen it. But I know it way precedes me as well. Church splits, people walking away from the faith, people walking away from each other. It's just something that happens. Again, is it like the thing that's going to instigate everything coming to a close? No, but it's building. There's momentum happening towards something changing. And that's what he's describing here. And again, he's choosing whatever words he wants to here. Lawlessness is increased. I don't care about what I do. I don't care about the ethics of what I do. I can do whatever I want to. Then love grows cold. I don't care about people anymore. I don't care about people anymore. If I am a believer, if I'm actually trying to follow the ways of Jesus, and I believe that my love is growing cold for people, if I think I love people less now than I did before, if I think that I'm seeing myself respond so poorly to people in my life, I've really got to stop and reconsider. I got to stop. I got to think it through. But the one who endures, he says helpfully, the one who endures to the end will be saved. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit closer to a date, right? He hasn't picked out something on the calendar yet, but we're getting closer because there's an end of this in his mind. All the wars and the rumors of wars and the battles and the natural disasters and the degradation of relationships and the degradation of people, that's all going to come to an end. And we get to what? Endure it. How are we doing at that one? It makes me, it's frustrating in some ways that as I look at the world around me, as I look at the way people are trying to change the world around me, I want love to increase, of course. I want us to all love each other more than we are. We need kindness, and we need patience, and we need grace, and we need mercy to increase. But I also understand that I can't legislate that. And I'm not going to talk somebody out of a hateful position. I'm going to love them out of it. And people that give up on relationships and people that give up on trying to be Jesus' example to someone because they're just running up against a brick wall. It happens online a lot. It happens in real life a lot as well. It's like, come on, endure. Endure. And there have been relationships in my own life. There's a couple of, in particular, relationships in my own life where I don't know how well I've endured because it's easier to give up. It's easier just to cut somebody off. We're being told here that there's value in endurance and the ways in which we see the degradation of society and the degradation of relationships shouldn't surprise us, but it shouldn't let us off the hook for trying to live out the life of Jesus in these contexts either. Enduring, that's what enduring really means in this context, right? Endurance is not, well, I give up. The world's going to hell in a handbasket, so I guess I better just get off now, right? No, it's done. That's not what it means. This is not Jesus giving them a way out, and that's what I really want you to get tonight. We're going to get to a definition, I think a clearer definition tonight, of the word ready. And ready does not mean you give up and you wait. If I'm trying to be ready for all these events to happen, if I'm trying to be ready for what's going to happen in the end, I don't get to just put my feet up and wait. The one who endures to the end will be saved. And you know what else is connected to that endurance? This gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all the nations. So who's going to be around to proclaim it? It's him. Those that endure. Yeah, I would say that he's drawing a contrast. Those that endure versus those that fall away, those that betray one another, hate one another, that sort of thing. I think there's a contrast being drawn there, yes. The endurance is the test of, yeah, exactly, right. And the ones that don't, the question is, I mean, for all of us anyway, we all have to look in the mirror and say, did I really get it when I said I was saved? Did I really get it? Right? And yeah, to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. All these things are valid ways of looking at it, right? Who are the people who will fall away? Who are the people who betray one another? These are all people that started, because if they're falling away, they started with something, right? So they started with some faith of some kind. What did Judas start with? I don't know. I certainly know what Peter started with, right? And I know this all happened to him. I'm good, I'm not. I'm good, I'm not. I'm good, I'm not. And then he was. In the end, he endured. Right, exactly. Yep, exactly. The gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations by those who endure, and then the end will come. This is also one of the more familiar ways that people are checking for signs. How far is the gospel going? The 1040 window in missions was the big thing for a while, because that was this area of the map where there was the most concentration of people who had not yet heard the gospel, who had not yet had scripture in their language, right? That's shifted a little bit. The emphasis has shifted a little bit, and we're making progress in that. But certainly that's one of the things that people are looking for, is not only are we sending missionaries there, but can they read the Bible? Can they read scripture? And the people that are working on that day and night are amazing. So that's definitely something that's happening. So, yeah, Bob. But the one who endures to the end, the question is, what's the word end mean? I believe it probably refers to what he's about to say, because he's going to get to a more fuller description of everything. But so far, at this point, this tribulation is experienced by people who will need to endure it. Will be saved, yeah. What is the meaning of will be saved? So does that mean that their faith proves to be authentic? Does that mean that Jesus actually is effectual for them? There could be a lot of different reasons that he's looking at that. There may be a physical sense in that too. I don't know. It could be both. It could be both. I don't know. They certainly endure up to and including to death, right? They will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death. So there's certainly a physical aspect to that in the context. Yeah. Yeah. All right, we're going to keep going, because we're going to be here all night if we don't. Yeah, Dale. So is backsliding a thing? Yeah. So yeah, Corinthians talks about the concept for sure. So the question, I don't want to get sidetracked on that notion right now, but the question is absolutely valid, and that's why we were just talking about with Tim. Have I worked out my salvation with fear and trembling? Do I understand what the gospel actually means? Am I living it out? Is there fruit in my life? These are all questions that need to be asked by believers regularly. Regularly. Peter was an example of that kind of concept of sliding back, being tempted, being afraid, whatever it was that drove him to deny Jesus, and then he's restored. So there is evidence of that, and we see it in our lives too, right? How many of us have had experiences in the faith where, you know what, I feel like I'm a lot less faithful now than I was? How many people have walked away? These are all things that are definitely part of our experience. Jim?
I look at that, I think about Judas and how as soon as he realized what he had done, he threw the money.
When Judas realized it, he was convicted, he threw the money back in the temple, right?
I've always understood that they were saved from the initial tribulation and getting put to death, but as they saw, and they could have been people who ratted out their own relational.
People that actually betrayed each other and fell away that way. Yeah, right. To go and finish the work that they were called to do. So I feel like there's no way to really clearly put a definition on this. We can come up with a lot of different kind of variables as far as individuals, but overall, what's the overall message is, am I going to be one who endures? And how am I going to become one who endures? And that's by continuing to allow Jesus to change me, to continue to let the Holy Spirit lead me. These are all evidences of an actually saved life. And unfortunately, some people can say that they are, and I've said this from here, and I'll say it again. Some people believe that they are, and they may not be. And so why does Paul say, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works within you to work into will for my good pleasure. I want to see if that's happening in my life, and if I'm not looking at my life, then I'm never going to know. I think that's a real part of this whole discussion. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Are the nations hating you? Yes, right. He's talking about believers, sure. And at this point, who is he talking to, right? He's up on the Mount of Olives with his disciples that are asking him this question about when the end's going to come. So as a group, they represent, right now anyway, the bulk of who's walking with him. Who else might be in earshot? I don't know. But yeah, it's not just an individual. Like some nation's going to say they hate you. No, but they hate what we are, who we are. Yeah. Okay. The Book of Martyrs gives us a complete, the tribulation that's happening. Yeah, and we don't have to look far to know that that's actually something that other cultures experience in a different way than we do right now. And the fear is always, are we going to get there? And the answer is, I don't know. But you know what I do know? I'm going to endure. That's where I've got to go. Okay, we got a lot of other work to do here. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, we're going to the back side of our handout here. The abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, and then you get this parenthetical insert, let the reader understand. We're trying to draw back to an allusion that Daniel gives us at a couple of different places. I noted there in Daniel 11:31 for you, where he refers to this notion of what the abomination of desolation does. And the biggest part of it is profaning the temple. The temple becomes corrupted from what it was meant to do. Idol worship takes the place of the worship of Yahweh. And again, historically, we have precedent for that. Antiochus Epiphanes did this and just dished everything that was in there and replaced it with idol worship. And we have historical evidence that that did take place then. What's going to look like now? This concept of the abomination of desolation is generically understood as the Antichrist. And the Antichrist, his appearance is going to be hotly debated among people. Yes, Mark? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm gonna take a quick peek. Where did "let the reader understand" come from is the question, and I want to look that up for just a quick second, because it is also elsewhere, so it's not just Matthew's idea. Let the reader understand. Yeah, it's there. It's there in the Greek, so I certainly think that it's not an addition later, I don't think. So. Yeah. So go back. Well, certainly the people that are listening to him would have been familiar with Daniel. But yes, absolutely. They could go back and see this for themselves and understand it for themselves for sure. Yeah. But we're not missing the fact that we're referring to what Daniel did, right? That's the ultimate goal. We're talking about this person who appears and does these things to make it clear that this is who he is. And this is, again, one of the things that we're looking for, right? Now he's getting a little bit closer to answering their question, right? When he's answering the question, what is he saying? This guy's going to appear, and this is going to happen. The abomination of desolation, standing in the holy place, in the temple, doing what the Antichrist is said to do in Daniel, which is profane it. Completely turn it into something else. That's when you know it's time to head for the hills, right? And that's what the rest of this section describes. Yeah?
Just to be clear, in this passage where he's stating, he's pretty much giving a place and a person.
He's talking about a place, yes. And certainly anyone who would have heard the phrase, the holy place, generically would have understood it to be the most holy place that they would have understood, which would be the temple. So, yeah, Jerusalem. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's right. No, good call. Thank you. So, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down and take what is in his house. Let the one who's in the field not turn and run back and take a slope. In other words, get the heck out of there now, because it's going to be bad. Now, this is fascinating because what he's just said is you're going to endure this. But in this case, endurance means flight, right? You got to give up what's comfortable. You're on your house, you're out of your house. You want your cloak? No, right? You don't get it. You got to go. You got to give up what is comfortable for you at this moment and get away. That's going to be a different kind of enduring, and guess what? We have historical evidence of the fact that that's exactly what happened. After the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, we call it the Great Diaspora, the spreading. And so we get a lot of the travels, especially of Paul and others, that are starting churches in these places where people were forced to go. So that's a spread that does in fact have a historical location to it. But we're also talking about what's to come too, right? Yeah, this is coming. So go. And then, of course, the calling out of the women who are pregnant and those who are nursing infants, that's not going to be fun. So I hope that it doesn't happen in the winter or on a Sabbath, so you're not working in the middle of it. People were leaving everything. Yeah, people were leaving everything behind. Yes, Bob? Why would they be concerned about the Sabbath in an emergency like that? I think Jesus is the one that's saying it, right? He's the one that's saying, I hope it's not on a Sabbath that you have to do these things. And the answer is that these things still matter. Yeah. It's still, obviously, it mattered enough to him to include it in this kind of an emergency description. And he's given this all to him himself. He's the one that's saying it, so he's including it for a reason. He wants them to not forget the fact that the Sabbath still matters, even in the midst of all this. Yeah. Yeah.
He's saying, be careful that it's not on a weekday or the Sabbath.
Oh, who's going to be there? But he's talking about pregnant women that are trying to deal with an infant or nursing while they're trying to flee. Right. Again, not fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be kind of hard for him to.
It would be. Yeah. Mark. Yeah, let the one who is in Judea, or let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Yeah, they're trying to get away from the focal point of where the Antichrist is showing up. Yeah. No, not everybody in the whole earth. Right, yeah. 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 And again, so now we have layers of meaning, right? Are there people who want to interpret that as meaning a broader area? And are people that want to interpret this as meaning everybody's got to go from wherever you happen to be? There are people that would argue that as well. But I think you're right. I think it's more localized than that here in this case. It's what he's got in mind. So, yeah, these are all real things that people are having to deal with. When this starts, when the Antichrist shows up, what are you going to do? Right? But they still need to be faithful. They can't, that's what I think the Sabbath thing is really getting at right there. I don't just get to abandon everything that was important to me before when this all starts. If I cared about the Sabbath last week and this all starts, do I still care about the Sabbath now? And that's, again, not saying I don't care about my cloak. My cloak's whatever. I can leave my cloak. I can leave my house. But do I care about honoring God? Do I care about keeping him the center of my life? Yeah, I should. And that's what so many of the letters in the New Testament are being written to people who are having to relocate and find a way to live out their faith in places that they never knew how to live out their faith before. And that is a tough thing. And there's lots of evidence about that. Sam? You're ready to go when it happens. Yeah, so there's almost like a preparation sort of motion to it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, Bob. Sure. It talks about Jerusalem, yeah. So, So who keeps the Sabbath holy is the question. Yeah. And Jesus himself already has had conversations with Pharisees about they were picking grain on the Sabbath, and he says, what really matters here? You're going to get your ox out of the ditch when it's a Sabbath. So those things are actually mattering. I think, again, he's just trying to say we need to keep the main things, even in the midst of all this. And I think, again, I think that bears out in the rest of the New Testament letters, where he's talking to a bunch of people that have been dislocated, that are trying to figure out what it means to live in a different culture, in a different context, and they still need to be faithful. They still need to be continuing following what they know to be true. As far as the geographic evidence of it, as far as how do we get this to a larger meaning, again, there's people that look at this differently. And I was just telling Mark that. I think some would make it more localized, and some want to blow it up and interpret it to mean a global event. And I think there's reason for that as we get further into this passage, where there's more evidence that that might be true. But that's where I think a lot of the argument comes from. Say that again? Would fleeing be a work? I mean, yeah. I mean, well, and again, why is he talking about nursing infants or trying to haul after a kid in those days, right? Or being pregnant? He did get called out, and he corrected them. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, again, why is he bringing this up at all? I believe that, and there's a lot of different ways that you could look at this, but I think he's still trying to say we can't just ditch everything that was important before. I know the Sabbath is important. I had not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law, he says in Matthew 5, right? So this is not something that he's like, well, whatever, you can just do whatever you want. But no, while I'm here, this is what matters. And I think that's what the gist of those arguments are from before. All right, we got to move. We're not going to get anywhere near finishing this tonight. So let's go back real quick. So when you got this order to flee, go to the mountains, get out of here. You got to get out of here. You got to leave everything behind. Hope it's not on a Sabbath. All that thing's going on. And then there will be great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. This is his second mention of the concept of tribulation. And this sounds a little bit more significant than the last one. And why is he giving these kinds of descriptions? Something that has never been. We've never seen anything like this before, from the very beginning until now. It's pretty amazing to see that that's the truth. But if those days had not been cut short, no human would be saved. And now we have another calendar question. Who's going to be saved when? We're going to get to the concept of the rapture next week when we talk about Paul. But the question on a lot of people's minds are, will believers live through the tribulation or not? Our church's position is that there's a pre-tribulation rapture that takes place, and we will not live through it. These days have been cut short. But that's one way to interpret it. And there are others who look at the same thing and come to a vastly different conclusion. And that's where we're just at right now. We're not going to dive into that today. We're going to come back next week and deal with the concept of when the rapture might happen. But he refers to it here. And then he uses this phrase, for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. And now we have yet another theological can of worms to deal with, right? Does God know who's going to be saved or not? Can he know who's going to be saved or not? Do we know who's going to be saved or not? There's the right answer. Thank you for shaking your head at that one. Spurgeon said that if he knew who was going to be saved, he would have a yellow stripe. They would all have a yellow stripe painted down their back, and all they have to do is look at the yellow stripe and know that one's fine, so I better preach to everybody else. But because there's no yellow stripe, I'm going to preach to whoever so will listen. And that's been my philosophy. That's the way I see this concept of elect. I don't have a problem with the concept of the elect. I don't have a problem with that idea. I think Jesus does refer to it here. Other people have a much bigger problem with it, and that's worthy of its own conversation. And we've had that conversation actually in this room for previous midweek studies. But for the moment, he's saying, look, this is a possible group of people that this is not going to, they're not going to experience it the same way that everybody else will. That's the general gist of what he's saying here, right? So this concept, I'm encouraging you to let that sit for a minute. We're going to come back to it and keep going with what he's talking about and how he's trying to answer the question. Then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. There we come again. False Christs appear. I will try to convince you that I'm the Christ. So follow me. Be with me. Do what I do. Look, here's the Christ, or there he is. Do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and they'll perform great signs and wonders. Jesus performed signs and wonders too, didn't he? Right? So are we going to be able to understand that as still false? Well, generally speaking, I come back to in my own understanding, Jesus' discussion of fruit, right? If I'm going to be with somebody who's claiming to have signs and wonders and to be able to do these things, I want to look at the fruit of his life. I want to try to figure out whether or not he's authentic as much as I can, even though I can't fully ever. Why does Jesus talk about the concept of bearing fruit? Because I feel like we can see something. We may not see the whole picture, but we can see something. And for many people who have been unmasked as false prophets, for many people who have been unmasked as false teachers, you begin to be able to see it because the facade melts away at some point. So, false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray as possible, even the elect. Hey, guys, guess what? This may be a real thing for you. Yeah, Tim. Yeah, if they're a false Christ and there's no cloud of an army of angels behind them, you might wonder if they're real. Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely. And again, the concept also of false prophets, right? I know the answer, so you got to follow me. Again, that will still be borne out, I think, the more you can follow somebody's life and you can follow somebody's example, for sure. But yeah, let's look for the angels. That's a good sign. Yeah, let's look for that, for sure. Mark. He gives this warning so many times that Mark thinks that there's a reason for it, that there's going to be some sort of desperation and that we're going to be looking for these people. Yep, and we got to be protected from choosing the wrong one. Yeah, no, he obviously cares a lot about this idea, and he's preparing us as best he can to be on our guard against it, for sure. Yeah. So, I've told you beforehand, I've warned you, this is going to happen. This is going to be a possible experience for you, so be ready. And that's what he gets to here at the end of his discussion. If they say to you, look, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe it. And then we get a little more clarity about what we're looking for. And this is an aside, how the coming of Christ is going to be unmistakable. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there vultures will gather. Two dramatically different images to describe the fact that this is really happening. The first is lightning. You've seen lightning? You've seen lightning fill up a sky, like a pitch black sky, and all of a sudden it's bright as day, right? Is there any doubt when that happens? Are you wondering, I don't know where that light came from, right? There's not, right? We have a clear understanding that this is not a man-made thing when it's actually lightning like that, okay? And then he switches images, which is really kind of bizarre, actually, but it's a really powerful image as well, too. If there's a dead person or a dead animal or a dead thing just laying out there on the ground, who's going to come and find it first? The ones who eat it, right? We shouldn't be surprised. This is unmistakable. If you see the vultures, guess what? Something's probably dead pretty nearby. So what is it that he's telling them here? You're not going to wonder. You're not going to be like, is he really here? I don't really know. And therein, I think also Mark lies one of his answers and one of his ways of protecting against the false teachers and the false Christ. When you're confused, when you're wondering, when you're saying, I don't see the cloud of angels behind him. This might be him, but it might not be him. I don't really know. That's not going to happen. The confusion about his identity is not going to be a thing. It's going to be clear. It's going to be clear. And he gives us some more images here to make that idea broken down. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will fall from heaven and the powers of heavens will be shaken. Again, are you wondering if that's happening? Are you thinking to yourself, what's blocking the sun right now? I don't really know. Where'd the moon go? Right? No. This is going to be like, what is happening? You're never going to wonder. The stars will fall from heaven. The powers of heaven will be shaken. Okay, so are we talking about literal planetary bodies hitting the ground? Are we talking about all these things taking place like literally? Or are we talking about a complete change of everything we know to be real so far in our existence, right? How are we going to understand this? He's trying to give us images that help us to understand it. And it very well may be that the sun goes dark. It's like a light switch, right? Just flick it off. And the moon disappears. We can't even see it anymore because it's not giving its light. And the stars will fall. And all these things, the point is, you're not going to wonder. You're not going to be confused. These are actual things that are going to take place. And again, let's go to Revelation, and let's talk about some of the imagery there to kind of highlight the same kind of thing. Yeah, trumpets. And now we're going to get some trumpets here, right? Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. Then all the tribes on the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. What's the sign of the Son of Man? It's debated. I don't know. There's a lot of possible things that you could look at there. But again, whatever it is, you're not going to wonder. And then we get the actual appearance of the Son of Man. And this is beyond our ability to comprehend. All over the world, everyone at the same time will be able to see this. I don't know how, but we're not going to wonder. On the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, it's not going to be hard to see. And then we get the trumpet. The angels will go out with the trumpet. So, again, if you're wondering about signs, things to look for, the trumpet. And Tim, he'll put you to shame, brother. Right? It ain't going to be the same kind of trumpet. You're a great trumpet player, but we ain't heard nothing yet, right? Right? And then what's going to happen is that the people will be gathered. The people will be gathered from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Hold your questions about the rapture. Hold your questions about that, about the new body. We're going to get to that, I promise. Next week, we're going to be in Thessalonians. We're going to talk about Paul's description of this, okay? Understand, though, this is a real thing. They're going to go out and they're going to get people. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. An agricultural example, right? When you see the leaves start to show up, you know what? We know what time of the year it is. We know that the season is right. So also when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates. Even when he says he's near, even when he says we're almost there, then in a few verses he's going to say, I don't even know when that's going to happen. So, the now and the not yet. Our desire to know and his desire not to tell us. Because what does he say? He doesn't know. Concerning that day and the hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, not the Son, but the Father only. Why are we trying to know something that even he didn't know? And then, let's skip back. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And you're saying, okay, now we're getting a little more calendar-ish. This generation will not pass away. Which generation? Who are we talking about? The guys who are listening to him right now? What are they going to see? Some of them certainly lived to see the destruction of Jerusalem. They got to 70 AD. So there's a historical precedent there. Does he mean the actual end when all this is coming and the Son of Man appears? Someone who was alive then is going to be able to see this now? We don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know why he seems to go back and forth as far as, I want to give you a calendar thing, but then I'm not going to give you a calendar thing. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of it, and then I'm not going to give you a little bit. You see what I'm saying? You can see the pattern here, right? All of it, again, is to underline, I think, this last sentence. Concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. I'm not going to answer your question, guys. I'm not going to give you what you want, which is a date on the calendar to circle. But be ready. And then he shifts into this discussion of being ready. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So, in the days of Noah, before the flood, what was happening? Everybody was living life. Eating and drinking and being merry. For tomorrow they die, right? That's what was going on. God looks at all that and says, you know what? I got to hit the reset button. But I'm going to save a remnant. So it's not a complete reset. Noah builds the ark, and until the day when Noah entered the ark, these people all around him, now why are you building a boat? It ain't raining. What do you need this for, right? They're thinking everything's fine. And then it starts to rain, and it isn't fine anymore. They were just doing life, unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. You know what? That's the way it's going to be here too. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. So, we're surrounded as believers, we're surrounded as the ones who endure by people who are just going to keep going, living life to the fullest, without a care in the world. And then what's going to happen? 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the one left. This is where some of the imagery that we saw in the Left Behind series comes from in those movies, right? And you see, all of a sudden the truck is empty of the driver and all that sort of thing, right? What's interesting here to me about this, where are people taken to? We assume, and LaHaye and Jenkins assumed, that when the ones that were disappearing to the good place. Does Jesus say that? No. In the context, we can go back to the angels collecting the elect and sort of thing, so we can make some sort of a connection with that. That can kind of make some logical sense. But you know what? I'm not sure. Because then he says, stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. Which one are you going to be, the one that leaves or the one that stays? Right? That's what I feel like he's trying to get at. Stay awake. You do not know on what day your Lord is coming. Stay awake. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. We've talked about this before, right? The thief sends you a memo. I'm breaking in tomorrow night at 7. Do you go to bed at 6:30? Or are you sitting there on the rocking chair on the porch at 7? Right? Okay. So it makes no sense for that to happen. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Now, I stopped here because what follows is a series of 4 parables in which Jesus defines readiness, and it's here that I want to end tonight. Parables which describe being ready as faithfulness. Parables which describe being ready as faithfulness. And for the sake of time, I'm going to summarize these. We may yet come back to them at the end of or the beginning of our time together next week, but I wanted you to see this. And if you haven't read from this point on, from chapter 24, verse 45, all the way through chapter 25, I encourage you to do so, because you're going to see some images here that help us understand what Jesus means by readiness. The first parable is the servant and the master, starting at verse 45, right? Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has set over his household to give them food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom the master will find doing so when he comes. You got a task to do, the master comes back, and he finds you doing it, sweet. But if the wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and begins to beat his fellow servants and eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day he doesn't expect, and he'll cut him to pieces. So what's faithfulness look like? What's readiness look like? Being found doing what you're supposed to do when he gets here. Right? The image couldn't be clearer, right? This guy was given a task to do, take care of these people. If the master comes back and finds you doing it, awesome. If the master comes back and finds you doing anything other than that, you got problems. And it's not just there that he gets to that. The parable of the 10 virgins, chapter 25, verse 1 through 13, concept of the wedding and the 10 virgins who were waiting to meet the bridegroom, part of the ceremonial arrival of the bridegroom. And they were waiting, and they were waiting, and they didn't know the hour that he was going to come, but they've got these lamps with them, so they're not hanging out in the dark. They run out of oil, they're in the dark. They have to go leave, they have to go get some more oil. Guess who shows up while they're gone? Okay? Faithfulness, readiness. That's what these images are trying to get us to. Afterwards, these guys that left to get the oil, verse 11, the other virgins came also saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered, truly I say to you, I do not know you. You weren't ready? I don't know you. Now, we have some tension here because we're saying to ourselves, faith and trust in Jesus is what we're talking about, but faith and trust in Jesus means faithfulness. It means consistently pursuing obedience. Jesus says, you want to save your life, you'll lose it. If you want to lose your life for my sake, you'll find it. There's connection between my intellectual assent to Jesus and what my body does. He makes that clear. And again, we get back to this concept of fruit. The parable of the talents drives home the same point. Guy's going on a journey, got his 3 guys together. I give you a lot of money, I give you a little bit of money, I give you just a tiny bit of money. You are supposed to do something with it. He goes away, he comes back. You should know this parable, right? He goes away, he comes back. The guy with 5 turns it into 10. Yes. The guy with 2 turns it into 4. Yes. The guy with 1 buried in his backyard brings it back and gives it to him. He gets chucked. What does it mean? Why is he giving us these parables right after telling us that the day and the hour is unknown? This is what it means to be ready. And then the one that scares me the most. Absolutely should terrify you enough to take your faith seriously. The sheep and the goats, 31 to 46. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations. Everyone's going to be sitting there. And he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Sheep are good, goats not so much. And how is he going to determine who's a sheep and who's a goat? What's he looking for? So he tells the people on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. These are the sheep." And how does he know that they're sheep? What does he say? "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." Those are all descriptions of, faithfulness, right? And they're saying, "I don't remember ever doing that for you, Jesus. When did I ever do that?" And what's he say? "Truly I say to you, as you did it for one of the least of these my brothers, you did it for me." Everybody. Everybody. And of course, the contrasting counterpart. "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels, for I was hungry and you gave me no food." How do I know who's a goat? You didn't feed me. You didn't clothe me. You didn't give me something to drink. You didn't welcome me in. You didn't visit me in prison. You didn't take care of me when I was sick. And they're saying, when didn't we do that? Whenever you refused to do it for anyone, the least of my brothers, you didn't do it to me. So you are going to eternal punishment. I'm sorry. Jesus has his choice of words, right? The Father tells him what to say. The Father gives him, he's obeying his Father. He's got his own mind, he's got his own power. He's 100% human, 100% God, but he's giving us the truth. And when he makes a connection between how we live and where we'll end up in eternity, we should listen. We should listen. I believe in Jesus. I prayed a prayer when I was 4 by my bed with my mom, or I went forward at an event and I filled out a card. Isn't that it? Isn't that all? Faithfulness is readiness and awareness. These are all interchangeable concepts. Readiness equals awareness and faithfulness. Awareness of what's going on. Awareness of these patterns. Nothing wrong with that. But what do you do in response to what you know? Jesus has never stopped begging people to do something with what they know. And when it comes to the end, that's especially true. That's especially true. It's not salvation by works. It's not earning God's love. It's not any of those things. It's when I am saved, it's when I am a believer, my life will reflect it. And I will bear fruit. And I will be a witness. And I will show love. And I will give care. And I'll be a sheep and not a goat. And I'll be the virgin prepared for the bridegroom to come. And I'll be the servant who's found doing what he's supposed to be doing whenever that day comes. That's what it means to be ready. And if you're thinking that readiness means stockpiling stuff and hiding out, if you're thinking that readiness means sitting back and waiting for it all to happen, you're not understanding what Jesus is saying here. How fun. thank you for walking through that passage with me. We flew over it. There's much more work that could be done on some of these key areas. And again, I want you to come back next week as we deal with the concept of rapture and how different people approach that concept. But I hope you're seeing the pattern. Faithfulness, readiness, witness. These are all vital, and I hope that this is what you're getting. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us online. Let me pray, and then we'll head out. God, we are awestruck and humbled tonight by what Jesus teaches in these amazing chapters. Salvation, the end, the Son of Man coming, the tribulation, the struggle, the endurance that you call for, the faithfulness that is called for, all of it is just swimming around in our minds right now as we read these really difficult passages. And I pray, God, that you would help what I've said tonight land if it's only of you, and that people would walk out of here with more of what you have said than what I have said. We thank you for the chance that we even have to understand your word at all. Help us to continue to study it and to give our lives to understanding it more and more each day. And we ask in Jesus' name, amen. Thanks again for joining us online. Take care. You guys in the room, thank you so much as well. We'll see you next week.